Hello and welcome to our tutorial. We are building on, where are we here? So we've a couple of tutorials here on, this first one here is on how to build our kind of 3D world that we're going to make with our tree, etc. This one is on particle systems, making a fire. This one's on setting up the depth of field in the 3D menu after putting in all of the signposts, etc. And then we'll be moving on to what we have here, which is so this is gameplay here, and I have a tablet attached to my device or my computer, which is and I've got swipe input or touch input on it, so I can swipe left and swipe right, and kind of negotiate or turn the world using touch input, and then I can press start here, touch input, and then I'm in my level, and we'll get to playing that level. Designing that a bit later. It's not finished yet. So what we're going to look at in this tutorial is we're going to look at our scripts. We're going to look at the menu system that I've put in and how it all works. So first of all, let's go over the basic things. There's a this is called titled the pit. So this is a blend file. So I've made this in Blender. All my blend files are in here, so I think it's called title. There it is there. So I've dragged and dropped that in and positioned it and given it a very basic sort of dark color. So that's in place there. So that's where that came from. That's not generated internally in Unity. We've added a few more bits and pieces to these objects here. So I've added a few more kind of wooden signs. Again, I just double clicked on the that's it there, double clicked on the blend file, brought me back into Blender, and I kind of edited that a little bit. So there's sort of a couple of basic changes that were made to the scene. And now I've got this object here, which is just a hand icon. So this is just a, is not on the UI. Now I could put one on the UI, but I've kind of chosen not to do that. This just sits out in front, and it's got a script on it. So let's have a little look at that script. It's very simple. This is just to tell the user that they can move left and move right, and then it disappears. Now the reason I haven't put it onto the canvas is because with a UI canvas or swipe input, if I'm not using a traditional sort of an overlay canvas, I'm using a world space canvas, so I don't want another canvas on top blocking the raycast input or blocking the touch input onto my my world. Anyway, we won't worry about it for now. Let's have a quick look at the script that's on it. Very complicated. That's it there. So it says function start. So on start, wait for 3 seconds, and then destroy game object. So if we press play, once it runs, we can count to 3, and then this will disappear. I can put a little animation on it, I suppose, and make it a bit better. But basically, that's it. It's just to give the user some sort of indication that they can actually swipe left and swipe right to turn the world. Okay. Now, let's have a look at how this works. So, I have made a camera sphere. So, if I just zoom out here. So, there's my camera, and then the camera sphere is just, as the name suggests, it's just a sphere. If you look over here, the mesh renderer is off, so that's the actual sphere itself there. And the collider is turned off, so I don't need either the collider or the renderer. It's just an object. I could use it empty, I suppose. and this is the object I'm going to rotate, and the camera is just a child of that. So if we look from the top here, and we turn on the renderer, you give a better idea. So if I rotate that on Y, you can see that the camera moves. So let's undo that, and if I do that again with it turned off, oh, wrong one. So this here, you can see it rotating around. So that's all we're doing with our swipe control. We're just rotating this camera sphere. So let's have a little look at how that works. So and how we do that. So let's have a look at how that works. So I have a main menu game controller, and on that main menu game controller, you can see I have my camera sphere here as an object, identified as and that's the object we're going to turn. And I've got a rotation speed. So let's have a look at this script. Now this is kind of where this is an interesting and complex script. So let's have a look at this. So first of all, we start off, we import the scene manager, and that's because we're going to in this scene we're going to so this function here is scene manager load scene character selection. So this is that's why we need this. So that's nothing to do with the rotation or the touch input. We've got a variable sphere, our transform. So that was what we saw there. So that's going to be the object we rotate, our rotation speed, and we've got a buffer, and we'll see what that does in a minute. And then we've got three private variables, vectors and a float, which is distance. So let's just go down and have a look at how this works. So I'm going to zoom in a few times and see this code. So first of all, we've got function update, and then this is our first line. So if the touch count equals 1, okay, and if you think of mouse input, you've got you can stipulate mouse input in brackets like this for which button you're going to press. So we're basically saying that if input.getTouch 0, so this is our first touch, dot phase equals touch phase begin. So if we begin to move on a single touch, okay, so something has moved, then what we're doing is we're going to log the starting position of this first input, this touch. Okay, now if we had a second input, a second finger touching the screen, it would be number 1, number 2, number 3, etc. as we had more touches. So if touch count equals 1, so there's one touch, that one touch, that first touch is this one here, and then remember the starting position. Now, then we're saying if it moves, remember the moved position. So now we have the starting position, which is called vector2 start, and then we've got vector2 now. And then we want to find the distance between these two. And that distance is worked out here. So it's vector2 start dot magnitude minus vector2 now dot magnitude. Now, what we're saying is, if the distance, so this magnitude, is bigger than the buffer, and we have set our buffer to equal 0. If we go back into Unity here, so buffer equals 0. So what we could do is we could increase this buffer size so that there was a tiny touch on the screen, like a very small movement, left or right, that nothing happened. So we can basically set up a dead zone. It becomes more important if you are using this sort of touch input for maybe a controller for a character. But at the moment we have set to 0. So if the distance is bigger than 0, then do something. Okay? Or and then we say if distance is bigger than 0. So first of all, we have to be bigger than the buffer before we can progress. And now we're saying, and if it's bigger than 0. Now at the moment, they're both the same thing. But you can see that this might be difference number. If distance is bigger than 0, what we're trying to do is we're trying to move right and move left. Okay? Now, this is how we work out right and left. So you can see it's sort of repeated down here. So if now dot x, or now dot x minus the minus the starting point of x, so that number is going to be x, is bigger than the y. Right? So if x is bigger than y, then we're moving right. Okay, and then the same down here. Okay, it says only this is under else, right? And the else means that if it's not bigger than 0, so if the distance is smaller than 0, okay, then I have the same thing here. The distance could be smaller than 0 if we moved in a negative direction. So if we move in a positive direction, you're moving right. If you move in a negative direction, you're going in the opposite direction here. Okay, so we've got left and right. And then we need to just tell the sphere what to do. So the sphere is going to transform that rotate. We don't want it to move on x. We don't want it to move on z. We just want it to rotate around its y-axis. So it's rotation speed times time. And this is minus rotation speed times time. Okay, so straightforward enough. We could, if we wanted, go up and down as well, but we don't need to do that now. So, but if you wanted to be able to in the game rotate up and down, this script allows for that. So this is you might want to look over that. So there's quite a bit to it. So we've got touch phase begin. We've not used this before. Touch phase moved, and then we've got our start, the initial touch on the screen, and then where we have then moved to, so our new position, and then we want to get the magnitude of that to determine sort of the distance, and then we're saying if the distance is bigger than our buffer, which is a variable, and then if it's bigger than 0, work out if it's positive or negative, and then move left or move right accordingly. So that's it. That's how we use our touch input to rotate right and rotate left. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, so that's and that's on our game controller, and then we've dropped our the object that we want to rotate in here. So I mean, let's just for the laugh. This is our whole island kind of here. Let's see if I can pick an object that's not. So let's say the title, the pit. So let's go to our game controller here. Instead of rotating the sphere, let's put that in and press play. Now when I rotate using touch input on my device, I'm rotating the name around its origin. So the touch input is completely separate. It has nothing to do with the camera position. It has nothing to do with what object is not relative to the camera. So we can get it to do anything we want. So in this instance, we want to do the camera sphere transform, and then when we rotate the sphere, the camera is the child of the sphere, and hence we get what we get. Excellent. So the second and last thing we're going to look at in this tutorial is we're going to look at our UI. So this was the original canvas. So if I just get out of this and go Game Object UI and create a canvas, and I'm going to delete this in a minute, but just to show you as an example. So this World Button UI is just a normal canvas. And a canvas can have three kind of states. It can be an overlay, it can be a world or a screen space camera, or it can be world space. We'll look at this one another day. We'll use that when we might put particles in our UI, so we'll talk about that another day. But screen space overlay is kind of the default. It's what you'd normally use, so it's literally overlaying the screen. But in this instance, we were going to use world space, so that was the main difference. And we always use scale with screen size. So let's just delete that and go back up here, so you can see that we've got world space. And our main camera is the camera that we're going to use in our world space. And then after that, everything is pretty similar. But thereafter, if you make an object, so if I make a new object here, if I go UI and make I don't know, it's like make a scroll bar. So here's my scroll bar. This is in world space. So, I've got my width and my height, and then I've got my X, Y, and Z position. You can see that their X, Y, and Z position has changed a lot, as has their rotation. So if I go down to this scroll bar here, I can change its X position, but its Y position, so up and down, which is what we're used to in a 2D interface. But I can also change its Z position. And if I just press play now, you can see that on touch input, I can slide the slider, but the slider is also in three-dimensional space, so it's in the scene. And so I can touch it and move the value of the slider, and you can see it's kind of going in and out of focus with my depth of field. But as I rotate the slider, I'm also rotating the world, which is why I don't have a slider in this menu, or a scroll bar, sorry. Anyway, delete. But you get the idea. So each one of these objects is it was made as a button, and then it was then placed in the 3D scene, just using the coordinate system here. So this was the one we started with. We've got character selections. Again, this one was placed and sized. And I put in standard image or background sprite. Duplicated it, moved it over here. Now these buttons have fairly basic input. So let's have a look at how this works in terms of their input. So it has an event trigger, so it needs an event trigger before it'll work. So if I delete this remove that component, this won't work. So this is actually this one here. So let's go back down. So we have an event trigger, and then we've got a script. Now what I've done with my scripts here is anything that's to do with the main menu, I've put MM in front of it, and then this is character selection on level 1. You can see I've only got one level 1 script at the moment, but I'll have a number of them by the end. So this is icon disappears. This is our hand icon, and then this is switch to level 1. Now I don't need to have this here on its own. I could put that in here. So I've got actually my switch to level, like character selection, in here. So I could actually take this script, take the content of it, so load level 1, and place it on the game controller. So let's actually do that and see how it works. So we'll double click this and open it, and we'll just so we'll call this change L1. Okay. Yeah, why not? And then we'll just copy it. Actually, we'll leave it as change because there's a reference to it. So Control C, and let's go to my main menu game controller. So I've got a function character selection. So let's just change it. Yeah, we'll call it L1 here. So change L1. So this is loading this scene, and this is going to load that scene. Okay, we'll save that. Now, go back into Unity, and let's take this here, switch level, and delete it. Okay, so that's gone. No longer exists. But we've taken that information and put it into this script. So now let's go back to play level 1, and if we scroll down here, we'll find that, we should find that stuff is missing. So, yeah, it says missing script. Okay, so let's, delete that component, remove component. So how do I get on click this to go to level 1? Well, the script I'm looking for is on the main menu controller, so I'm going to drag that in there as the object that's relevant. The script is called game controller, so I'm going to go to game controller, and then the function I made was change to level 1. So that's the function I want to run. So every time this is clicked, it's going to look at this object, and then it's going to look at that function in that script. So change level 1 in that script on that object on click. So let's see if that works. And like I said, we can rotate, and we'll just hit start, and off we go. So that's pretty much it. All of these are literally just duplicated and moved in the world. There's a couple of interesting sort of, I won't call them bugs, but interesting sort of changes you get when you rotate some of these buttons in 3D space. They can stretch on you, so just be careful doing that if you are going to use 3D buttons. So they have to be kind of carefully placed. And apart from that, there is a video tutorial on how to make that fire, so I don't need to explain that to you now. There's a light there. That's another light. So I think we've covered everything that is in this scene now, including the icon, the swipe input, and then the head-up display. So hopefully everything you need to know to make this interesting 3D menu. And this is what we're going to look at next.